Je vais partir dans 3, 2...
De l'autre côté, si Benoît est là, c'est comme un participant de plus.
Sure.
C'est vrai.
OK. Alright, je vais partir le... Mais je pense qu'il n'y a personne en attente sur Teams.
Je pense qu'on ne peut pas savoir sur YouTube s'il y a quelqu'un ou pas. Alors, je vois ici Brent Nelson. So, hi, Brent.
Je suis là.
Excellent. Francophone, Brent?
Les deux. Donc, choisissez votre langue.
Mais vous étiez, je ne vous ai pas dans la liste d'inscription.
C'est Jean-Philippe Fournier-Gaudreau qui m'a fait parvenir la réunion.
D'accord. Et Jean-Philippe, de quelle organisation est-il?
Serios Systems, c'est 3RIOS.
Ah oui, d'accord, je vois. Et c'est là lui-même, Jean-Philippe, voilà, Jean-Philippe
Normalement,
Fournier.
oui, on est avec un client, on finit un SR avec eux. Donc, lui et aussi Benoît Martin qui devait participer aujourd'hui.
Okay. So I'll switch in English because we may have other participants. So we know who is there on Teams, but we also have YouTube where we have participants. Now, I don't know how many people are showing up on YouTube. We don't have the same interface as with the Teams. We're Teams, we know who's online. So I guess I will start in a minute. So what is your role, Brent, in C3RES?
So I'm president and CEO, founded the company with Jean-Philippe about 5 years ago.
Okay. So let's get going then. So you should see my PowerPoint screen now. So, so thank you everybody for showing up, and thank you for your registration. So the presentation today is about when AI performs the R&D. Well, can you still claim SRED tax credits and how, if you can? So just to get started with some interactivity, who already knows what SRED is? If you can answer in Teams and in YouTube, in YouTube, you can do it in the comment section. And I see that on Teams, Brent knows what SRED is all about. And have you already claimed SRED? Is the second question. You can say yes or no. Not just the acronym, but also how it works. So I guess you said yes, probably, Brent.
Yeah.
And then what impact does vibe coding have on SRED? You have 4 choices here. So you can say A, I don't know what that is. Or B, we cannot claim AI-generated code at all. Or C, we can now claim less dollars than before. Or D, we can now claim more dollars than before. So you can give your opinion on the, again, in the thread, in the conversation. And some answers will come naturally as we cover. So the presenter, one slide to present myself. I'm the president and founder of Emergex SRED Subsidies, and it's been like 30 years since we've been doing this. I'm a computer science graduate myself with 40 years of experience in the IT industry. And I'm a member of the Association for Tax and Fiscal Planning, which is the association around SRED. For the professionals of SRED, it's one of the association, more of the financial and tax side. And I'm a certified project management professional. So I invite you to connect on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to connect back. So one slide about Emergex. So that's just to show how we qualify to talk about the subject. So we are a leading firm of experts claiming SRED and e-business. E-business is in Quebec. IRAP is throughout Canada, like SRED, and other grants. And our team has been doing that for 30 years, claiming thousands of claims and hundreds of millions of dollars in tax credits and grants. And our team is strong with PhDs, which is one thing that distinguishes us. We have 6 PhDs in our team, and that allows us to be stronger in identifying uncertainties and how to document them. And we, for every dollar we claim, we receive, our clients receive 98 cents. So this is even after audits, this is what's left. So only 2% is left with reductions or cuts by the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency. And we're mostly financed or paid by a percentage of the fees, which is the norm in the industry, although we also do hourly support for things like reviews or audits for clients that have prepared their claims internally but suddenly are hit by audits. This is how we intervene and help. So we start by a reminder of what is SR&ED, because every time we present a specific topic, we discover that some people come by interest, but they don't know what SR&ED is or need some refresher. So we'll start with a refresher before we go on the main topics of AI and SR&ED. So it means scientific research and experimental development. We should say SR&ED, but somehow organically, the acronym is evolved as SR&ED. So it's a financial incentive to encourage R&D investment in Canada instead of abroad. It's the largest program in Canada for industrial R&D support. It's between $4 and $5 billion per year, and 19,000 companies receive this money throughout Canada. And provinces add $1.5 billion. In the case of Quebec, we're talking about 500 million to 5,000 companies. And in the case of Ontario, it's a bit less money for more companies. So that tells you that there's more SR&ED in Quebec than there is in Ontario. In the case of Ontario, you may reach like 65% of the salaries is what you can recover. In Quebec would be a bit more with some conditions. So how much can we claim? And often people are surprised by what is the high percentage of tax credits that is returned from the salary expenditures. In the case of Ontario, on the left, we have the maximum rates, and on the right, we have the minimum rates, which apply to larger companies or companies that are foreign owned. While on the left, typically these are Canadian-controlled private corporations. They qualify for the highest rate. So salaries is what is mostly the most favored type of expense, where 2/3 of the salaries in SR&ED are refunded by the government. We also have subcontractors, but it's half as lucrative to claim subcontractor fees. Cost of material consumed, that works for industrial or life sciences industries. We don't have that in the information technology and software industries. And now this is new. This is new in the past 2 years. It's the R&D equipment now can be claimed, and that could also work for companies doing AI, provided that you have your own servers with your graphics cards or your GPUs to claim that expense. In the case of Quebec, we're talking about 74% of salaries engaged in SR&ED activities, but we now have, since a few years, a minimum exclusion threshold, which means that for every employee, the first $19,000 of salary is excluded. Or if the company is smaller, 50,000 is what is excluded in terms of expenses. And after this exclusion, this is where we calculate 74% of the eligible salaries. So overall, to give you a better idea, we're talking also about 65% of tax credits as a rate for the salaries as being refunded. Subcontractors, 38%, and equipment. Equipment pays more in Quebec than in Ontario, because now Quebec also started only in the past year to finance R&D equipment. This is new. It's never been like this. In the past 30 years, we've been claiming SR&ED. That was never the case. But so good news for those who have R&D equipment, which is mostly in the industrial sector or life sciences, like laboratories. We also have admin salaries also in Quebec. A little bit, this is like a few $1,000s we can claim, but while we're there, might as well sweep the floor and pick up every expense that we can claim. So the SR&ED eligibility criteria, just to make it visually and simple, we have for every project to qualify to SR&ED, we have to meet 3 criteria. So the first one is uncertainty, and this is, you can see it as after you've exhausted all the possibilities that are known to solve a problem. This is where you say we have an uncertainty. We don't have a solution yet, and we have to go into a research and development process. And when doing that, we typically go with a first step, a first iteration, trying to find a solution. And then we often find that, well, it does not work. It was not obvious, and indeed it failed. So from what we learned, we start with part of the knowledge acquired. We start again and do another iteration. So some of the stuff, the work we've done is thrown away, but some is like new knowledge that we can use to do a second iteration or prototype. And then we may fail again, and that could repeat itself like many times, as you can imagine. But in the case here, let's say we have a third iteration, and that one is successful. This is where you have advancement. The advancement is positive here because we have success. We have surmounted the uncertainty. But it's also possible that the advancement is negative, meaning that we failed. But we have learned something. We have learned that it is impossible, given the means we deployed, it was impossible to solve the uncertainty. And that still makes the project eligible. And then the whole process is a process of systematic investigation where we have to formulate hypotheses and analysis and then conclusions. In the case of software development, we don't talk about hypothesis. When we work and develop, and we try something else, but we don't talk about hypothesis. But this is how we should describe the R&D still. So this is a word we put on top of the real work that developers do, but we call it hypothesis because this is the closest representation to what is the scientific method, and the scientific method is the basis for the R&D process in Canada. And there's some other criteria that we will see later. So, but officially there are 3 criteria, but there's some others. So eligible activities, well, the pure R&D activities will be analysis, investigation, understanding, reverse engineering, concept and design, algorithm, software architecture. These are the pure products of the mind, and we have computer programming and software engineering also eligible. Prototyping is a perfect case of R&D, because if you do a prototype, you know in advance that you don't have the solution to produce the code from A to B or A to Z directly. You have to go through different steps, and one first step is a prototype. So prototyping is a perfect demonstration that you do have a process of SR&ED. So data collection also, especially in the case of AI, data collection and data correction or transformation is something that takes a lot of time in AI, and this is covered also, even though you may do it without technical people. Non-technical people might be the one cleaning up the data, but that becomes a support activity that is eligible also, and that can be claimed even though the people are not technical people. Testing and debugging also, up to a certain amount, are eligible. Activities that do not qualify, well, standard practice is what you're looking for to determine if something is SR&ED or not. So standard practice are techniques known in the industry or known in the public domain like books or internet or learned in school. And when you have standard practice, this is not R&D. So you have to go beyond that and hit a wall. And this is when you have to surmount that wall that you start having SRED. Things like training and education are not SRED eligible, even though you learn about something sophisticated and algorithms that others have designed. Well, you're learning, so you're still not an expert. You have to finish learning before you can say, well, okay, now I am now since I finished my training, I am now an expert on the topic. I can say I'm an expert on the topic, and then what I will do when I encounter an uncertainty, then this is where a SRED project will start. Now, about AI in SRED. There's 4 dimensions when we say about AI in SRED. What are we talking about? Well, one thing is vibe coding to develop a software product. This is the pure title of the presentation. But also you have how CRA adapts to AI. So the Canada Revenue Agency is the one administrating the SRED program. So we have to know how they behave with AI, how they adapt to know how we can claim successfully or not SRED claims as a technology company. But then also using AI to write SRED claims is a tempting process or tempting solution. It has some problems associated with it, and we'll cover that. One thing that we will not cover in this presentation is the development of AI product itself. It's a whole new field where you develop a product that does AI. Whether it was developed with AI or not is something else. So, definition of vibe coding, it is a new style of software development where programmers describe objectives in natural language and let the large language models generate most or all of the code, refining the results through iterative prompting rather than writing every line manually. That term was created by Antigravity, one of the co-founders of OpenAI. Now, beyond coding and vibe coding, there's also AI agents. So they go beyond autocomplete, and now they start to do autonomous multi-step experimentation, corrections, and other iterations of development. So it goes even beyond that vibe coding. So the problem with vibe coding is that, well, AI changes what developers actually do in the fundamental manner. And the Canada Revenue Agency, or CRA, is suspicious about the project descriptions in the T661 tax annex written by AI. So the T661 is the form inside the tax return, contains what is specific to SRED. So you fill out this form with the technical projects and the financial expenses, and this is how companies receive their money. It's through the tax return. Now, when the project descriptions are written by AI, CRA is wondering, well, can we validate if the development was real or not? Because maybe the description of the SRED project is super nice, super technical, but it could be completely fictive. So it could be complete fraud. So how do we know that a nice description corresponds to reality or not? And if it's a true project, honestly, well, still the activities could be eligible or not to SRED. So the CRA is not clear about that because AI produces such a nice text that is convincing. So the answer, and then of course the question they ask is, did humans perform the systematic investigation in the 3 criteria? And so the answer that CRA has done so far is to dig deeper, to look at the contemporaneous documentation. This is something they did not do in depth, and now they're doing it more in depth as an answer to this big uncertainty that they have. Is the project real, and is the project eligible to SRED? So question for you, again, on YouTube and Teams. So is AI coding eligible directly as an SR&ED activity? So yes or no. partly. So did Brent Nelson, did you come up with an answer?
I would say partially, but we don't use it that way, so I don't know.
Okay, so it's a bit of a trick question first, just to make you think and talk. Well, coding is not directly eligible to SRED. It is a supporting activities in a SRED project. So the short answer is no, but it's not directly, but indirectly it is eligible, of course, because this is most of the expenses and most software companies. This is the programming and the coding. So the AI coding and the coding in itself, whether it's human or not, is mostly an expense that is claimed a large measure or a large proportion by software companies. So coding can be eligible as SRED as long as the project itself is eligible, because it's a supporting activity like data collection or data transformation. But less coding means less hours spent, and that means less salary costs to claim and less tax credits. So a first potential answer to the question I asked before is that given the same amount of development, we should see less salaries and less tax credits than before because of AI vibe coding. On the other hand, some companies might decide that because it's much faster to develop, they can go faster with their projects and they can create more projects and more products and more features. And therefore, they might say, well, let's invest more because we can generate more returns with projects and products. So in that case, it could be that in the end, the AI vibe coding generates more SRED tax credits. So does this new non-technical work by humans qualify as SRED? So normally we have our technology director here, who's a PhD in AI, taking over in the presentation, but now he happens to be abroad where there's electricity has been off. So I'll take over with the presentation for the rest of the PowerPoint. So as part of our team, we have, I mentioned 6 PhDs is one of them. 3 actually have done their thesis in AI. So we have just extremely well qualified for AI projects. So in our team, we also have other technology consultants that are mostly engineers that can cover IT and other industries. So AI challenges the 5 pillars of AI. The first 3 ones we saw already: technological uncertainty, systematic investigation, and technological advancement. But then it also challenges the notion of qualified personnel. So the investigation is performed by people with the relevant expertise. This is what qualified personnel means. So therefore, can a non-technical human qualify, or can AI qualify? It has to be qualified personnel, strictly speaking. And then contemporaneous documentation is another very important pillar of SRED. So the records created as the work happens, this is the definition, not reconstructed at filing time. So many companies may not have much documentation. It's only when it's time to do the claim that, they assemble documentation or create documentation. But that's going to be that was a problem in a small way before, but now it's becoming a bigger problem because this is what CRA is relying on now, not before, but now, yes. So the impact of SRED on the uncertainty, it is a double-edged sword because first AI reinforces the uncertainty because we can now do the search for answers and know what is in the public domain or not, and we can be more thorough. So if we can say we did not find an answer in the public domain thanks to AI, AI was able to dig deeper and just in so many corners of the web, and AI can tell you there's no answer to the problem you have. This is a stronger demonstration that you have an uncertainty. On the other hand, the uncertainty becomes harder to find, because sometimes the AI will give you the answer when you ask what the problem is. And if you have the answer, well, instead of having a clear uncertainty, well, you have the answer. So it's not an uncertainty anymore. You cannot claim it as a SR&ED project, but that's a good thing, because ultimately you already have the answer, and that accelerates your product development, which is the ultimate goal. So the uncertainties remain despite AI, and some example would be system-level uncertainties in a complex architecture, where you can imagine AI vibe coding created one piece of code, but they did not make all the code, especially the existing code, interact. And this is when all this interaction goes together, then you may have some problems of speed and functionality. Places where the capacity, the computing capacity is limited, like in an embedded system, this is where AI is not an embedded system, or it's not reproducible with limited computational capacity, and therefore you cannot reproduce that situation. Some of the things like latency required for a certain technical threshold. So the AI gives you an answer, gives you code, but it doesn't tell you if the code will be fast enough for the real life operations. And then what about robustness? Once you develop code, you can have something that's quite functional with 10 requests per second, but if you have 10 million per second, then it'd be completely not work. So the scalability is another issue with what is developed with AI. And that means it still is an uncertainty that you can claim, even though AI is providing answers. But new uncertainties also come from AI. So AI created new uncertainties that we can claim in SR&ED. The reliability and controllability of AI outputs. We know that we have outputs from AI that differ from one time you make a request, the second time you ask the same request, the result may be slightly different because the models are probabilistic. Adaptation from generic to specific context. So the AI may give you an answer that is generic, but in your context or in your specific setup, in your specific industry, with your specific limitations, maybe it's not going to work. So this uncertainty is new. Prompting, orchestration, and retrieval uncertainty is something that once you develop code by humans, you kind of you know what you developed. With AI, there's like a certain part of a randomness that comes with what is generated. So the explainability and auditability is important, and you can imagine some industries where security or life-threatening situations happen. Well, you have to know and to be sure that A plus B equals C, and that doesn't come naturally with AI, and that creates a problem. And things that are hard to claim, hallucinations, because hallucinations, even large companies do not have a solution to that. So it's hard to pretend a small company in Quebec or in Canada can have an answer to the hallucination. So it's hard to imagine an advancement that is achievable with that. So there's no answer coming to that. So this is something that would be hard to claim as an uncertainty. Beware not to put that as an uncertainty in a SR&ED claim. Now, the systematic investigation, the other criteria, is revolutionized. This is one that is completely different. So then systematic investigation, the process is based on the scientific method, where you specify an hypothesis, you test it, you do the analysis, you do a conclusion, and then you repeat. So this is the basis of the SR&ED process in Canada, based on the scientific method. Now, it implies a human-led investigation that remains the requirement for SR&ED eligibility, because salary costs are what SR&ED mostly refunds. So even if in the case of AI, well, it's efficient, but it's not salaries, and therefore the human-led investigation has to be done by humans. So the AI does not eliminate the requirement for a systematic investigation. It changes how it's performed. And typically we had, in the case of human, the process of architecture, design, code, test, and debug. And that is the iteration repeats itself. In the case of AI, the architecture, design, and code is done by AI, by the prompting, and we're left with the testing to do by an AI of what is done by the AI to adjust the prompt and the architecture, and then do a formal code review. That's typically how we distinguish the process or the workflow between humans before and now with a vibe coding. So the other criteria, the third criteria, technological advancement, how is it changing or not? Well, it remains as is. So regardless whether a human or AI wrote the code, we have to find out if the obstacle is solved or declared unsolvable. So the outcome must still be a human-driven process of systematic investigation. Now, so human achieved this technological advancement. So the real question about qualified personnel, which is the fourth pillar of the 5 pillars, well, the CRA framework assumes a human investigator. AI coding does not fit that assumption clearly. So the traditional model, the human did the hypothesis, run the experiments, and interpreted the results. So clearly, the qualified personnel was human. So can we extend it and say that qualified personnel would be AI? Is the question. So with the vibe coding or agentic model, the AI generates the code, proposes the fixes, and tests variants, and the humans accept reviews and accept the output. So qualified personnel, the road is blurry. It's like human and AI together. So qualified personnel, does a non-technical person vibe coding qualify for a SRED? Well, non-technical people can ask and develop code now, right? So fundamentally, a non-technical person vibe coding would conflict with the requirement of qualified personnel. So one recommendation here is to keep and use experienced developers to lead the development process, because the developer can look at the code generated and say, well, this architecture is weak because it doesn't use a database that scales properly when we will connect millions of users. And therefore, I can, as an experienced developer, recommend a different database that what AI is suggesting. So the experienced developer is what we see in the industry being still employed by software companies, while it's the junior developers that have a harder time now staying employed or finding a job in software companies. This is probably the first wave of people having a hard time finding a job because of AI. It's the software developers. We expect that other professions will find it harder to find a job in the future or keep a job. But my experience is that in the past 2 years, I see when I network, I see people, or young people, just looking for a job as a programmer, which was not frequent before. When you were a programmer, everybody wanted to hire you, but it's not the case now. But if you have a choice between junior or senior developer, probably senior developers is what you should keep, even though they cost more, but they can do something that junior developers cannot. They do not have the experience. They do not have the experience of hands-on coding that enables them to review the architecture and improve the architecture of what is being vibe coded. So does personnel include AI? Well, even if CRA accepted AI as personnel, well, the AI subscription fees and tokens will fall into the overhead proxy. So it's not eligible separately. We cannot take this expense and claim it like a salary. But now you can still possibly claim servers and GPUs as your internal use for internal R&D infrastructure, this can be claimed now as equipment, R&D equipment. So documentation, the potential documentation, pre-vibe coding, in our experience, claims often pass without documentation being checked in depth by the CRA. So even though there was little or no documentation because you have 1, 2, 3 developers and they work without documenting, that was fine, except for the justification of hours or timesheets. That was always being asked by the CRA, but this is more like a financial question than a technical question. And before vibe coding, the code itself was an example of proof. The ultimate proof was that, well, here's a piece of code of 100,000 lines. That doesn't come out of a hat, so somebody has to have spent a lot of time and has to have done a lot of R&D to come to that. But that doesn't work anymore. The algorithms, handwritten algorithms also were something which was, well, if we have this algorithm, well, there's a human that did the work and this is R&D, so we can claim it. Timesheets was always a good demonstration of the time spent doing R&D. Other things, monthly project summaries or development sprint summaries were also places where you can have description of the R&D process. And the code evolution through Git commit was an interesting one as well, because it was contemporaneous. You could not forge a date where the commit was done. And but then what happened was often the commits of people were not documented. That was a weakness, but it didn't matter too much because there was other types of documentation. Now it will become important. So vibe coding was the blind spot was documentation, or is documentation, because vibe coding's whole appeal is to skip the rigor. You don't write down why you tried something. You just prompt again, and then if it doesn't work, well, it's so easy to do that you just prompt until you get something stick. You get something to stick on the wall. So it looks like trial and error doing that, which is pretty bad for SR&ED. This is an expression you don't want to use in front of the CRA auditors because it's the antithesis of R&D or systematic investigation. And using a process of vibe coding with just throwing questions or prompting questions, it looks like this trial and error, which isn't good. So that is structurally opposite to contemporaneous documentation of hypotheses and results. So we have to come closer to that. So teams must move away from year-end summaries towards capture-based documentation, ideally. So that means that using tools that automatically link technical claims to contemporaneous evidence would be best. So Git commits, for example, documented Git commits is something automatically generated and becomes a strong proof. Pull requests, project management tools like Jira, ClickUp, or Trello are other tools that are naturally filled out as R&D is done, and that can be recalled when CRA asks for contemporaneous documentation. So eligible activities in the vibe coding era, well, we now what happened in terms of R&D can be demonstrated with the prompt refinements and the multiple fail approaches or the testing or the architectural changes that you impose on the AI. But where's the supporting evidence for the CRA? So you've done it, just doing it in itself is R&D, maybe R&D, but now CRA wants the proof. And so the challenge is not just to be eligible, it is also to prove that it is eligible. And what to do practically? Well, separate the problem from the implementation. Look at log the investigation as it happens. So log the uncertainty that you met, the attempts, the failures, the conclusions, independently of how the code was produced. So if it's AI, still document. If it's human, attempts and failures, document it as well. And name the human. So you have to be specific. You can say John is the one who encountered this uncertainty, and Cindy is the one who attempted this step, and this step is the step, whether it's with AI or not AI. So naming the human makes it qualified, and you distance yourself from the impression that everything was done by AI, which may not be something that you want to show to the CRA. You want to show the humans involved in the process and doing the systematic investigation. So documenting your Git commits, they provide a strong documentation. So that's an interesting precision that was not something. I mean, often we see Git commits are not documented, and now this is something that should change. So this is our recommendation. So the AI-assisted SR&ED project collaboration, how SR&ED can be done both with humans and AI. Well, the humans identifies the technical uncertainties and decide what hypothesis to test. It designs the experiments and evaluates the outcome. It determines the next iteration, while the AI coder does a lot to simplify the development process, because it allows to search and summarize research papers and existing solutions. So finding solutions is faster, and identifying uncertainties and confirming there are uncertainties is much faster. Generating the code is the big saving in time. And proposing optimization ideas, still with agents, you have something where you can produce new generations or versions and they're being tested. So AI agents is a nice addition to vibe coding. And producing visualization scripts might help you also to as a human, to understand what was output and how that should be fixed or reorganized. And documenting as well is something where AI gets strong and where often programmers are not really motivated in documenting. So examples of documentation that we recommend among what is possible, well, the list of prompts and the failed prompts. Somebody is telling me that they had created a skills file, an MD file, where at the end of every day, the question was to the AI, summarize. So give me the list of my prompts of today and summarize the answers in 2 or 3 lines and save this as my documentation for the day. So that is very good as a way to collect the prompts and also the outputs without generating massive amounts of useless text, but it's structured enough that it can be looked at as contemporaneous documentation. So the outputs should be identified and documented. And same thing with the rejected solution. So instead of just going ahead and prompting for the next answer, well, it says take the time to document what failed and the reasoning behind selecting one solution or not. So these architecture decision and the experimentation artifacts and logs are types of documentation that are worthwhile. If you have performance measurements or benchmark results as well, and we mentioned before, the project management tasks generate some documentation as well. So anything proving the experimentation is worthwhile, and you can document it in any tool you want, but AI in itself can help you document with the example I mentioned with the skills file. So now, different dimension of what AI, how AI works, which SR&ED is, how is the Canada Revenue Agency adapting to AI? So the SR&ED claim, when a SR&ED claim is written with AI, so it is that tempting for a company to say, well, it's AI is so good at writing such nice text that seems to comply with SR&ED. So because the AI understands what the criteria are, so we can ask AI to document our SR&ED. Now the danger with that is first that the CRA will look at the AI-generated technical narratives with caution, because we all look at AI and we can recognize the AI output. Sometimes it is so clean, there's no typo, there's no grammar, there's no grammatical errors, and this is AI generated. Sometimes we see repetitions, or sometimes there's some set expressions that are coming again and again as generated by AI. So we can recognize AI, and CRA can also recognize AI output. And so they're going to be cautious, as we said before, whether it's real and whether it's a deliberate shred, or is it just smoke and mirror. So the generic AI written T661 write-ups are red flag CRA reviewers are trained to spot. We suspect that beyond their human feelings or human impressions about AI-generated outputs, that they might probably use tools to detect AI-generated contents. Tools like Killbot will tell you if a text is 100% or 66% generated by AI, and then this be more suspicious and ask for more documentation. On the other hand, if the text is purely written by humans and then the AI detection tool tell you that it's 100% generated by humans, you're most likely that CRA will consider that to be shred because it's the usual process they know. So during audits, according to our recent experience, the CRA examiner will find easy answers to your obstacle and uncertainties and discredit your claim. So this is a frustrating experience because you've done genuine shred, you have identified your uncertainty, and the examiner will take this and put it in ChatGPT or other chatbot and ask, well, is it truly an uncertainty, or can you find a solution to that? And if the AI says, yes, I found a solution to the problem you describe, well, the CRA may not look further and will throw it at the taxpayer saying, well, it's no shred. And well, it may not be true because when you claim shred, you're looking at the state of technology as it happened. So that may be 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you looked at the solutions to your technical uncertainty and there was none. But today, maybe as technology advances fast, maybe there is a solution. But the chatbot or the AI chat may not know that and will give you the answer as what is today possible and not, and will not consider what was the state of the art 2 years before. So you as a taxpayers have to prove that when you encounter the problem, there was no solution in the industry. And this is where documentation, as things happen, is so important. You don't want to be stuck in a situation where your problem has been solved in the past 2 years, and then you're denied because the CRA does not consider or does not see the proof that when you encountered a problem, it was a problem for which there was no solution. So the CRA now want to see documentation and validate in depth. And we think, again, it's so much easier now to put thousands of pages or hundreds of pages of documentation and ask the AI, is the documentation demonstrating a systematic investigation? Is this documentation demonstrating the identification of uncertainties? So before it was humans who would read a few pages and make a judgment. It's possible to go through thousands of pages. So the whole process of shred audit is completely different. Now, the tool neutrality doctrine is training. So this is like maybe on a philosophical note. Officially, AI is a tool. So like a compiler or an integrated development environment, it's a tool. So the human used the tool, and therefore the human is doing the R&D. The tool is just a tool. And whether you program in JavaScript or in Python, well, it's just a tool. Well, that doctrine assumes the tool executes what the human already decided. But agentic AI increasingly decides like a human, tests and iterates on its own. So we think within the next 2 or 3 years, that will become a real policy fight, not just an audit nuance. And that will challenge the whole concept of shred itself. And now how Emergex can help in this context? Well, first you may ask, why should I call Emergex instead of doing it myself with AI? Well, So our PhDs have the technical depth to identify what is an uncertainty or not, better than generic AI answers. And we can know what was state of the art in terms of R&D 2 years ago versus now. And this is something the AI cannot do. Our technology consultant can review your documentation, tools, and processes as well. So it's not just about producing your SRED claim, it's also improving the whole process for the future. So reviewing the process and tools and coach your company, your developers to redesign them and therefore come up with contemporaneous documentation that is better suited to defend your claim. So we know many CRA examiners and their style. So we know that some are very attached to the notion of uncertainties. Some others will look at the process, the systematic investigation, and some others will look at what they call conceptual advancement. So in case of refusal after an audit, we can even assist you in suing the CRA. So we've done that a few times, and nobody wants to go in courts for 5 years. But often in the process of issuing a notice of objection and then suing the CRA, negotiations will turn out that our clients receive 50, 70, or 100% of the tax credits that they claimed, and that by being accepted or being accepted partly, it keeps the client in the SRED program, because what you do not want to do is to be refused, and because you refuse 1 year, every following claim will be refused. You don't, this is not always what happens, but you don't want that to be your situation. You don't want the same auditor to refuse you the next year because he says, well, it's the same R&D than last year. Last year I refused it, so I'll refuse it this year. So you don't want that. And this is where fighting for a year allows you to stay in the program. And that's, of course, a lot of dollars for the long term. So we stay up to date with the SRED law and the CRA practices. And then as a concluding slogan, AI can generate the code, but Emergex helps you prove the SRED behind it. And that concludes the presentation. And I open the floor to the question.
We do have one question.
Okay.
From Gregory, who asks, what is the value of refereed publications from our team to establish novelty and risk, notwithstanding IP concerns?
So could you repeat that?
So what is the value of refereed publications from our team to establish novelty and risk?
So refereed documentation, you say?
Publications, I think we're...
What is this?
You can speak, yes.
I can ask it in audio form. So if we submit refereed publications to legitimate journals or conferences where they have to be reviewed and then accepted, what do you think the value is in establishing the value proposition and risk, since most scientific publications are only accepted if they meet some objective bar for novelty? Like, do they care? Will they care about that?
Yes, maybe I can ask Amin. I can ask Amin to provide a first answer to that. Our colleague here on the line. So refereed publications, so academic publication from the team itself. Well,
you mean publication in popular papers?
In academic journals.
Refereed in academic journals. Like, so for example, I'm in a small company now, and we often wonder about the value of publishing. It used to be in a very large company, like a $200 billion a year company. And even then, there was a constant debate whether it's worth publishing in the open literature. Partly it has many advantages, also IP disadvantages. Does CRA take it seriously if it's in a legitimate, in Nature or in IEEE transactions on very exciting stuff or something like that?
Yeah, how we say that you have to understand that the SRED program is devised to solve technology problems. It's not devised to establish a novel solution. So it's not for example, to perform research, there is many program to finance the research, but SR&ED is not for novelty. SR&ED is devised to help companies to solve existing technologies problems. You know what the difference between the
So it's a
I don't want to take too much time, but the issue is that I think if you have novelty, you probably have technical risk. Of course, it's not one-to-one. But that's kind of the thing.
But we don't present novelty.
There's probably present these systematic investigations. So publishing in a paper that's being a peer-reviewed paper is a strong demonstration that you have something that I mean, if the paper identifies that there is a technological uncertainty, the fact that it's reviewed by others makes it stronger. And then the paper itself, if it underlies a systematic investigation to find a solution and come up with a solution that the paper presents, again, this is another demonstration. So it's what the paper contains that what matters. Does it correspond to the 3 criteria of the program? But I would definitely consider that publishing is a strong demonstration of innovation and possibly SR&ED.
For example, if you have a project, and you develop a new solution, this doesn't mean that the project is SR&EDable, is SR&ED eligible. You have to prove that during the development of that novel solution, you met some difficulties with the user technologies, and you spend time and effort to solve these challenges, these technologies. So you can have a novel project and it's not eligible to the SR&ED program.
Yep. Do you have an example of your such paper that you had published?
I don't have a good example. I mean, I've published a few papers in my day, but I would suggest that in computer science and AI, many of the problems that you would publish are technically challenging, especially if you validate them. It's okay. I think I got an answer. It's good enough. Thank you.
Okay.
So it's not.
Thanks for the question.
About at the end, it's not the matter is not novelty. It's a limitation of the tools, development tools.
Okay. Any other question, Brent, or anybody from YouTube? Sam, any question that was typed in YouTube?
I'm monitoring the situation and nothing's coming up.
Okay. So if that's it, I will conclude the presentation and thanking you, the presence of the participants, and I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. Please accept my connections, and if you have any issue with SR&ED or AI with SR&ED, just feel free to connect with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You control the live feed, Sam. Thank you.
I am ending the meeting. Okay, meeting ended.
And we'll let Benoit finish. Benoit is finishing the YouTube